In the heart of Chicago's Pilsen neighborhood, where brick buildings press close together and winters cut through every bone, David Moreno grew up learning that loyalty mattered more than wealth. Born in 1981, he was the middle child in a working-class family. His father, Hector, ran a small auto repair garage, while his mother, Rosa, worked double shifts as a nurse's aide. Money was scarce, but dignity was non-negotiable. David wasn't the type of child who craved attention. He was quiet, steady, and always ready to lend a hand. By the time he was 10, neighbors trusted him to shovel snow, carry groceries, or keep an eye on their kids. Teachers noticed his patience. He didn't argue, didn't mock, and seemed to carry an empathy beyond his years. As he grew older, that patience became resilience. He wasn't the most athletic or the most popular, but people gravitated to him. His brown eyes had a way of listening before he even spoke, making others feel seen. For David, kindness wasn't a choice, it was who he was. But kindness can also be a weakness. At 17, on a warm summer night, David was standing outside a corner store when he first saw Tamara Lewis. She was 19, bold, restless, with a reputation that made others whisper. Ripped jeans, a loose bun, and a defiant stare, she walked as if the world owed her something. Where others saw danger, David saw depth. He noticed the fleeting softness in her eyes, the kind that appears when someone is tired of fighting, but doesn't know how to stop. That night they talked until the shop owner shooed them away. Tamara admitted she hated school, hated her stepfather, hated feeling invisible. David didn't try to fix her problems. He just listened. And that was enough. From that night forward, their connection grew fast. Too fast, according to his friends. They warned him. She's trouble, man. Don't get pulled in. But David believed he could be her anchor. While others mocked her, he defended her. Where others saw a ticking bomb, he saw someone worth saving. By the time he turned 18, David was convinced Tamara wasn't just a phase. She was his future. He worked small jobs, saved money, and even talked about getting an apartment one day. To him, love wasn't about who Tamara was in that moment. Love was about who she could become if someone just believed in her. That conviction would shape the rest of his life. Because when Tamara's world eventually collapsed, and everyone else stepped back, David stayed. And not just for a season, not just for a year. He would wait for her through more than a decade of absence, building his life around a promise most people would never understand. While David's world was shaped by quiet discipline and family sacrifice, Tamara Lewis's life followed a different rhythm. One built on survival, defiance, and broken promises. She was born in 1990, on Chicago's South Side, the eldest of 4 children. Her mother, Deborah Lewis, worked long hours at a laundromat, while her stepfather, Anthony, floated between jobs, often returning home drunk and angry. Tamara's biological father had disappeared before she could remember his face. From the start, Tamara carried burdens beyond her years. At 9, she was cooking boxed macaroni for her younger siblings. At 12, she was soothing her mother after violent arguments. By 13, she had already learned to rule the streets enforced harshly, show no weakness. At school, teachers called her unruly. She talked back, skipped assignments, and got into fights over insults others would have ignored. But the truth was simpler, she didn't trust anyone. Anger was easier to carry than disappointment. By her mid-teens, Tamara was already in trouble. She and her friends shoplifted cheap jewelry and makeup, laughing as if the world couldn't touch them. Soon it wasn't about the thrill but necessity. The South Side was unforgiving, and Tamara liked the sense of control that came with bending rules. Police knew her name before she turned 16. She was warned, scolded, and briefly sent to juvenile detention, but nothing stuck. To Tamara, authority meant betrayal, and punishment only sharpened her defiance. Yet for all her recklessness, she had a magnetic charm. She could flip from tough to tender in seconds, lighting up a room with her laugh. People gravitated to her raw confidence, even as it burned bridges. That charm was part of what drew David Moreno to her in the first place. Where others saw a problem, he saw potential. But as the years passed, Tamara's choices pulled her deeper into the streets. She ran with older friends who dealt drugs, who taught her how to spot weaknesses in shopkeepers, and who convinced her that fast money was worth the risk. At 19, she was skipping entire weeks of school. At 20, she dropped out completely. By 21, she was drifting between couches, hustling part-time jobs, and dreaming of a life bigger than the one she had, but refusing to take the hard road to earn it. The breaking point came in 2015. At 26, Tamara and two acquaintances attempted to rob a small electronics store. What started as a quick grab spiraled when the clerk resisted. In a flash of panic and bravado, Tamara pulled a weapon. The clerk survived, but the moment sealed her fate. Police caught the group within hours. For Tamara, there would be no leniency this time. The charges, armed burglary and aggravated assault, were stacked against her. At sentencing, she stood stone-faced as the judge delivered the outcome. 12 years in prison. Her friends disappeared. Her stepfather shrugged. Even her mother wept but admitted through tears, "I can't keep saving you, Tamara. You have to live with what you've done." But one person stayed. In the courtroom gallery, David Moreno sat quietly, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on her. While others shook their heads, he held on to a promise only he seemed to believe in. When the verdict came down, he whispered to Deborah, "Don't worry. I'll wait for her." And he meant it. From that day forward, Tamara's life and David's life took separate paths. Hers behind steel bars, his in the outside world. But those two lives remained bound by a vow that would carry them through 12 long years of letters, visits, and sacrifices. For most people, a prison sentence creates distance. Friendships fade, lovers move on, and family members quietly step back. But for David Moreno, Tamara's 12-year sentence was not the end of their story. It was the beginning of a promise he had no intention of breaking. From the first week of her incarceration, David built his life around her absence. Every Friday, after long shifts at the local grocery store, he sat down at his small kitchen table with pen and paper. His letters filled page after page. Updates about his day, stories about neighbors, memories of the past, and dreams of the future. Sometimes he tucked in a photo of himself at a family barbecue, or a clipping from the Chicago Tribune sports section, just to remind Tamara that the world was still moving, and he was saving a place for her in it. The prison staff came to know him by sight. Month after month he showed up for visitation, his face calm but hopeful. Guards nodded when he passed through security, calling him the loyal one. Other visitors noticed too. While most inmates' families came less and less over the years, David never missed a chance. But loyalty came at a price. To support both himself and Tamara, David worked 2 jobs. By day he was a receptionist at a small dental office. At night he stocked shelves at a supermarket. The exhaustion was constant. Paychecks were split between rent, bills, and the commissary money he sent Tamara. What little he had left went into savings for the future he believed they still shared. His friends moved on. Weddings came and went, birthdays were celebrated without him, and photos circulated of families growing. But in David's pictures, there was always an empty chair beside him. He wanted children, but that dream stayed tucked away in a drawer with the rest of his patience. Every time someone suggested he let go, David pushed back gently. "She just needs someone who won't quit on her. If I leave now, then what was the point of everything we started?" And so he waited. For Tamara, those letters and visits became a lifeline. In her cell, she read his words over and over, memorizing the lines about his daily routines. She kept the photographs taped to the wall, a reminder that someone outside still believed in her. But prison is a world of survival, where loyalty is currency and secrets are protection. Over the years, Tamara hardened. Fights broke out in the yard, alliances shifted daily, and trust was dangerous. She never told David about the darker realities of life behind bars. The debts, the betrayals, the way women built fragile relationships for comfort only to see them collapse under pressure. She kept her struggles buried, sending back letters full of promises. "I'll be better when I'm out. We'll start fresh. You'll see." David clung to those promises like scripture. He decorated his small apartment with framed letters she wrote, hung new curtains for the living room, and bought sheets for a bed he imagined sharing with her one day. By the time 2019 neared, David was 38 years old, still waiting, still faithful. His hair had thinned. His shoulders carried the weight of years of sacrifice, but his hope never wavered. To his family, His devotion was both heartbreaking and admirable. His mother, Rosa, often told him, "Mijo, love is good, but don't let it be your prison." David only smiled and shook his head. "It's not prison, Mama. It's love. And one day, it'll all be worth it." What he didn't know was that prison was changing Tamara in ways he couldn't see, shaping her into someone who no longer fit the picture he carried in his heart. The woman who would walk out 12 years later would not be the same one he had been waiting for. And when that day finally came, the reunion David dreamed of would turn into the beginning of his darkest chapter. As the years ticked by, the countdown to Tamara's release became the drumbeat of David's life. Every letter, every phone call, every carefully marked calendar square pulled him closer to the moment he had been waiting for. By 2019, after 12 long years, the end was finally in sight. Tamara would walk free in October, and David felt like the universe was finally rewarding his patience. He prepared with the devotion of a man rebuilding a dream. His small apartment in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where he had moved for steadier work, became a canvas for the future. He bought new furniture, painted the bedroom walls a soft gray, and filled the kitchen with Tamara's favorite foods: fried chicken, cornbread, collard greens. He even bought a new coffee maker, remembering her habit of drinking it strong and black. Neighbors noticed his excitement. The usually quiet man was suddenly buzzing with energy. At the corner store, he told the cashier, "She's coming home. After all these years, we're finally going to start our life." His co-workers at the dental office joked about his second honeymoon. David only smiled. He had endured enough doubt. Now was the time to believe. His family, though, carried mixed emotions. His mother, Rosa, worried silently. She saw the way David had sacrificed his youth, the way his hair had grayed too early, the way his shoulders hunched under the weight of waiting. She asked him once more, "Mijo, are you sure this is the life you want? 12 years is a long time. People change." David kissed her cheek and whispered, "Love doesn't change, Mama. She's the same girl I met when I was 17. We'll be okay." But Rosa's silence told another story, one of a mother who feared her son's heart was walking into danger. In prison, Tamara was also preparing, though in a different way. Outwardly, she told David she was ready. In her last letters she wrote, "This is it. Our time starts now. I can't wait to come home to you." But privately, her emotions were tangled. Prison had reshaped her habits, her identity, her desires. The woman stepping out of those gates was harder, more guarded, carrying secrets David had never imagined. Still, she needed his loyalty, and so she leaned on the hope he offered, even if she knew deep down that living up to his dreams would be impossible. When October arrived, David could hardly sleep. He pressed her release date into his memory, October 9, 2019. The night before, he laid out a simple blue shirt and slacks, shaved carefully, and ironed his clothes twice. He set his alarm for dawn but woke long before it rang. Driving to the prison, his hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He rehearsed what he would say when he saw her. "You're home now. We made it." Outside the gates, David stood waiting with a bouquet of fresh roses. His heart raced as he spotted her walking out, dressed in the plain clothes the state provided. For a moment, the world blurred. She was free. She was his again. He rushed forward, wrapping his arms around her, whispering, "You're home, Tamara. You're finally home." She hugged him back, stiff at first, then looser, her eyes darting toward the officers still watching. For David, it was the happiest moment of his life. For Tamara, it was the beginning of a different kind of prison. The prison of pretending to be the woman he believed she still was. That night, David threw a small welcome dinner at his apartment. His mother Rosa baked cornbread, his sister brought wine, and neighbors stopped by to congratulate them. Smiles and laughter filled the room, though beneath it, unease lingered. His best friend Marco pulled him aside and whispered, "She seems different, man. Like she's not really here." David brushed it off with a smile. "She just needs time. 12 years is a long time." But deep inside, a sliver of doubt stirred. What if Marco was right? What if love wasn't enough to bridge the years between them? The day David had waited 12 long years for had finally come. He drove Tamara home from the prison gates in silence, his hands trembling on the steering wheel. She sat beside him, staring out of the window, watching the trees and billboards fly past as if the world had become a blur. David tried to fill the silence. I got your favorite snacks, hot chips, grape soda. I thought we'd start small, you know? Just ease back into things. Tamara gave him a quick nod, her lips pressing into a thin line. He forced a smile, convincing himself it was just the shock of freedom, the adjustment to air without bars around it. When they arrived at his apartment in Milwaukee, David carried her bag inside and gestured proudly. It's not much, but it's ours. I painted the bedroom and the kitchen. Look, I stocked it with everything you love. Tamara walked through the room slowly, her eyes scanning the walls, the curtains, the framed letters she had written over the years. Her face was unreadable. David waited for a smile, a laugh, some sign that the years of sacrifice had been worth it. Instead, she just said softly, "It's nice." That evening, David hosted a small welcome dinner. Rosa baked cornbread, Marco brought barbecue, and neighbors filled the living room with laughter. Everyone wanted to see the woman David had spoken of for more than a decade. They hugged her politely, asked her questions about her plans, and told her she was lucky to have someone as loyal as David. Tamara smiled when necessary, but her eyes stayed distant. She picked at her food more than she ate, and when people laughed, her smile lagged behind. To David's friends, it was noticeable. To David, it was forgivable. Later that night, after the guests left and the dishes were stacked in the sink, David turned to her. "It feels good, doesn't it? Finally being home. Just you and me again." He reached for her hand across the couch. Tamara let him hold it but didn't squeeze back. "I'm tired," she murmured, pulling away gently. "It's been a long day. I think I'll go to bed." David's smile faltered. "Of course. You rest. We've got all the time in the world now." He stayed awake long after she closed the bedroom door, replaying the night in his head. The dinner had gone well enough, the family was supportive, and she was finally here. Yet something in her eyes unsettled him. It was like she had walked into a house that wasn't hers. When David finally slipped into bed, Tamara lay stiff on her side, facing the wall. He whispered, "Good night, Tam. I love you." She didn't answer. David stared at the ceiling in the dark, reminding himself, it's just the adjustment. She's been gone 12 years. Give her time. But even as he drifted toward sleep, a quiet doubt pressed against his chest. What if love wasn't enough to erase 12 years of distance? And what if the woman lying beside him was no longer the Tamara he had waited for? The next morning, David woke before Tamara. He lay there for a while, watching her back rise and fall as she slept. For years he had imagined this moment, sharing quiet mornings, sipping coffee together, starting their new life. Now, with her finally beside him, he felt strangely like a guest in his own dream. When Tamara stirred, David greeted her warmly. "Morning, Tam. I made pancakes. Just how you like them, extra syrup." She sat at the table but barely touched her food, pushing the pancakes around with her fork. Her eyes seemed to drift somewhere far away, past the kitchen walls, past him. David tried to spark conversation. "Do you remember that time we got caught in the rain on 18th Street? You laughed so hard your makeup ran." "Yeah," she replied softly without looking up. The short answers continued all day. Whenever David reached for her hand, she found an excuse to move away, adjusting her sleeve, scratching her arm, sipping her drink. When he leaned in to kiss her cheek, she flinched. Not enough for someone else to notice, but enough for him to feel the sting. That evening, David decided to try again. He spent hours preparing her favorite meal, fried chicken, collard greens, macaroni and cheese. He set the table with care, lighting a single candle in the center. When Tamara sat down, he smiled nervously. "I wanted tonight to feel special, like the first step of everything we've been waiting for." She nodded, ate quietly, and offered only a single comment. "The chicken's good." After dinner, David reached for her hand under the table. She pulled away, this time more deliberately. His chest tightened. "Tamara, it's been so long. I've missed you. I've missed us." His voice cracked with vulnerability. Tamara pushed her chair back suddenly. "I told you I'm tired. I don't want to talk about this right now." Her tone was sharp, final. The words hit David like a cold wave. He sat frozen at the table, the candle flickering between them, his heart pounding. He wanted to argue, to demand an explanation, but something in her eyes warned him not to push further. That night, when they climbed into bed, David tried once more. He slipped closer, his hand brushing her arm. "I just want to hold you, Tam." Her body went rigid. "Not tonight," she whispered, turning her back. David lay awake for hours, staring into the darkness, fighting back the dread curling in his stomach. For 12 years he had imagined this moment, the warmth, the closeness, the joy of finally being together again. But the reality was emptiness, rejection, silence. Unable to sleep, he quietly picked up his phone and called Marco, his best friend. "She won't even look at me, man," David whispered into the receiver, his voice trembling. "It's like she's here, but she's not. I keep telling myself it's the trauma, that she just needs time. But what if it's more than that?" Marco sighed on the other end. "You waited 12 years, brother. Don't start doubting now. She's been through hell. Give her space. She'll come around." David nodded even though Marco couldn't see him. "Yet maybe you're right." But as he ended the call and slipped back under the covers, David knew something deeper was wrong. The woman he had waited for, sacrificed for, built his entire future around. She was slipping further away with every passing hour. And by the end of the next day, the truth would shatter him in ways he could never have imagined. By the third day, the silence in David's apartment felt suffocating. The walls that once carried his hope now echoed with a tension so heavy it clung to every breath. That Thursday morning, David tried to stay optimistic. He made coffee strong, just the way Tamara liked it, and set a mug in front of her. "We could take a walk later," he suggested. "Maybe visit the park, catch up with life outside." Tamara barely glanced at him. "I'm fine," she muttered, her eyes fixed on the window. The words stung, but David forced a smile. "I just want us to feel normal again. We've waited so long for this." She looked at him then, and for the first time, her gaze carried something sharper than distance. It carried impatience. "David, not everything is about what you want." The remark cut deeper than she intended, but David heard it loud and clear. For 12 years, everything he had done, every sacrifice, every hour of overtime, every lonely night, had been about her. And now, she dismissed it as if it were nothing. That evening, after hours of walking around in circles inside his mind, David gathered his courage. As Tamara sat on the edge of the bed, tying her hair back, he spoke firmly. "Why do you keep pushing me away, Tam? Why won't you touch me? Why won't you even look at me the way you used to?" Tamara froze, her shoulders stiffening as though his words struck a nerve. For a long moment, she didn't respond. Then, in a voice so low it was almost a whisper, she said, "It's not you, David. My body. It just doesn't work like that anymore." David blinked, confusion clouding his face. "What do you mean? You don't want me anymore?" She snapped her head up, eyes flashing with panic and frustration. "Don't twist my words. I'm saying things changed in there. I changed." Her voice cracked on the last word, and suddenly the distance made sense. The flinches, the silence, the stiffness. It wasn't just about adjusting to freedom. It was about something deeper, something she had hidden. David's chest tightened as realization crept in. "Are you saying you don't want women anymore?" His voice trembled on the question, heavy with disbelief. Tamara stood abruptly, pacing the room. "Don't say that. Don't you ever say that out loud." Her voice rose, filled with fear more than anger. David's heart sank. All the years of sacrifice, the dreams of marriage, the children he imagined, they collapsed in an instant. The woman he had built his life around no longer wanted the life he had waited for. But David didn't yell. He didn't accuse. His voice broke with sorrow as he asked, "Why didn't you just tell me the truth, Tamara? Why did you let me waste all these years believing in something that was never going to happen?" Tamara stopped pacing. Her jaw clenched, her eyes darting away. She couldn't answer, and in her silence, David found the cruelest answer of all. For him, her betrayal wasn't just about desire. It was about dishonesty, about building his life on a lie. For her, his questions weren't just painful, they were dangerous. In her mind, his knowledge threatened the fragile shell of pride she had built. If he spoke, if he told anyone, the secret she carried could destroy her reputation, her family's view of her, even her identity. The air between them grew thick with unspoken words. David sat on the bed, his hands trembling. "I gave you everything," he whispered. "More than half my life. And this is what I get back." Tamara's eyes filled with something he couldn't read. Shame, fury, desperation. To her, his sorrow felt like pity, and pity was something she could not bear. That night, their silence became more dangerous than words, because David wanted answers, and Tamara wanted to bury them. And those two desires were on a collision course that could only end in disaster. Friday, October 11, 2019, the third day of Tamara's freedom, should have been a night of peace. Outside, the Milwaukee streets glowed under the amber haze of streetlights. But inside David's small apartment, the air was heavy, thick with silence, secrets, and fear. David had spent the day replaying Tamara's words, the confession she had slipped out the night before. "I changed." Those two words circled in his mind like a curse. He had given her 12 years of his life, every ounce of patience and loyalty he could muster. And in return, she admitted that the love he had waited for was gone. That evening, he tried one last time to bridge the gap. He cooked fried catfish and green beans, meals he knew she loved. He set the table with 2 plates, hands trembling with hope and dread. When Tamara sat down, she barely touched her food. Her fork clinked against the plate in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Finally, David broke the silence. "I can't keep living like this, Tam. I gave you 12 years. 12 years I can't get back. And now you act like I'm nothing to you." His voice shook but carried a firmness he hadn't shown before. Tamara's eyes flickered with anger. "I told you, David. Things changed. Leave it at that." His frustration boiled over. "No. I deserve better than half-truths. If you don't want me, then say it. If you don't want women anymore, then admit it. But don't keep me here like a fool." Her chair scraped loudly as she stood. "Don't you dare say that out loud. Don't you know what that means for me? For how people will see me? You'll ruin everything." David stood too, his voice breaking. "I don't care what people think. I cared about us. All I wanted was honesty." For a brief moment, silence filled the room. His words lingered like a knife of their own, sharp, undeniable. And then something inside Tamara snapped. Her shame twisted into rage. In her mind, his questions weren't just heartbreak, they were exposure. His knowledge felt like a threat she couldn't control. And control was all prison had ever taught her to cling to. She stormed into the small laundry nook, her hands shaking, and grabbed a length of heavy cord from the basket. When she turned back toward him, her eyes burned with desperation. "Tamara, no," David whispered, stepping back, hands raised in disbelief. "Please don't do this." But she was no longer listening. The years of secrets, the pressure of shame, the fear of being unmasked, all of it poured into her movements. The struggle was brief but violent. David tried to push her away, his voice choked with pleas. "Stop. We can fix this. Please." But her grip only tightened, driven by a fury she could not contain. When it was over, the apartment was silent again. But this silence was different, colder, final. David lay crumpled near the couch. His dreams of loyalty and love ended in the very home he had built for a new beginning. The table remained set, 2 plates of untouched food staring back like cruel witnesses. Tamara dropped the cord, her chest heaving, her mind racing. For a moment, she stood frozen, staring at what she had done. Then she collapsed into the nearest chair, burying her face in her hands. The man who had given her everything was gone, and the secret she had fought so hard to bury had now cost him his life. The morning of October 12, 2019, the residents of David's apartment building sensed something was wrong. Normally, David was the kind of neighbor who waved on his way to work, who carried groceries for elderly tenants, who left the smell of fried food drifting through the halls. But that Saturday morning his apartment was silent. No footsteps, no clinking dishes, no soft hum of his radio. By mid-afternoon, concern grew. Mrs. Carter, the elderly woman in the unit below, told another neighbor she'd heard thumps the night before. "Like furniture scraping," she whispered, and then nothing. She had dismissed it as moving chores at first, but now, she wasn't so sure. When David failed to show up for his Saturday shift at the supermarket, alarms truly went off. David was never late. His manager called his phone twice, then 3 times. No answer. By evening he contacted David's mother, Rosa. Rosa rushed over, her hands trembling as she knocked on her son's door. No response. The lights inside were dim, shadows pressed against the curtains. Her stomach sank. She called 911. Minutes later, Milwaukee police officers arrived. They pounded on the door, announcing themselves, but silence answered back. With Rosa's permission, they forced entry. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of fried food and candle wax. The table was still set for 2, plates of untouched food sitting cold and stiff. A bouquet of roses lay wilted on the counter, their petals browning. And then in the living room, officers found him. David Moreno, 38 years old, lay motionless near the couch. His face was pale, his body stiff with the unmistakable stillness of death. The cord lay discarded nearby, an eerie reminder of the struggle that had taken place. Rosa's wails echoed down the hallway as officers guided her away from the scene. Neighbors gathered in clusters, whispering in disbelief. The investigation began immediately. Detectives photographed the apartment, bagged evidence, and dusted for fingerprints. They noted the plates of food, the lack of forced entry, the absence of stolen items. This wasn't a burglary. This was personal. It didn't take long for Tamara's name to surface. Her release papers were found among David's belongings. Letters from her filled a shoebox near the bed, dozens of them taped neatly to the wall. Neighbors confirmed they had seen her arrive just 3 days earlier, carrying a small bag. Detectives quickly realized the timeline was painfully narrow. David's death had occurred less than 72 hours after welcoming her home. They traced Tamara's steps. The bus station confirmed she hadn't purchased tickets. She wasn't at her mother's apartment. Calls to her siblings led nowhere. It was as though she had vanished into the city, carrying the weight of her secret and her crime. Meanwhile, the medical examiner confirmed what detectives already suspected. David had been strangled. The bruising around his neck matched the cord found near his body. The struggle had been brief but forceful. To the detectives, one conclusion became clear. David's death wasn't random, and Tamara was the only logical suspect. The story began to spread through local media. Headlines painted a tragic picture. Man waits 12 years for his partner's release, found dead 3 days later. The community mourned him as the man who had given everything for love, only to be betrayed in the cruelest way. Candlelight vigils were held outside his building. Strangers left flowers at the doorstep. For Rosa, grief turned into a plea for justice. Through tears, she told reporters, "My son gave his life to love someone who didn't deserve him. Please find her. Don't let his death mean nothing." The search for Tamara intensified. Police distributed her photo to bus stations, airports, and shelters. Officers scoured the city, chasing tips and leads. Every hour that passed made the case more urgent. But Tamara had learned in prison how to disappear. And for now, she remained a ghost, haunting the city, while the man who had once anchored her life was laid to rest. For weeks, Tamara Lewis evaded capture. She drifted through Milwaukee's streets, moving between cheap motels, shelters, and acquaintances who didn't ask too many questions. But her face was everywhere, on news reports, police bulletins, and neighborhood watch flyers. Each day tightened the noose around her freedom. It ended one cold November morning. A bus driver recognized her slouched in the back seat, hood pulled low, and quietly alerted police. Within minutes, squad cars surrounded the bus. Tamara tried to slip out the rear exit, but 2 officers blocked her path. She was arrested without a fight, her face pale, her eyes hollow. The community breathed a sigh of relief, but for David's family, the real battle was only beginning. In March 2020, the trial of State of Wisconsin versus Tamara Lewis opened at the Milwaukee County Courthouse. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, community members, and David's family filled the benches. Rosa sat in the front row every day, clutching a framed photo of her son, her lips whispering silent prayers. The prosecution painted Tamara as manipulative, selfish, and violent. They outlined David's loyalty, how he had worked 2 jobs, written hundreds of letters, and waited 12 years for her freedom. only to be killed within 3 days of her release. David Moreno gave his life to this woman, the prosecutor declared, pacing before the jury. And when he asked for honesty, for nothing more than the truth, she repaid him with betrayal and violence. Evidence was overwhelming. The cord used in the killing bore her fingerprints. Neighbors testified to hearing loud thumps the night of the crime. Forensic experts confirmed David's cause of death as manual strangulation with ligature marks consistent with the cord found beside him. But it was Tamara's own words that sealed her fate. In interrogation tapes played for the jury, she broke down. Through sobs she admitted, "He wouldn't stop asking, he wouldn't stop pushing me. I snapped." The defense tried to argue diminished capacity, that prison trauma had left her mentally unstable, unable to control her impulses. They painted her as a woman hardened by survival, carrying scars invisible to the eye. But the jury saw something else, a choice. A choice to end the life of a man who had given her everything. Throughout the trial, Tamara avoided Rosa's eyes. When Rosa testified, her voice trembled. "My son believed love could fix anything. He gave her his heart, his money, his life. And she destroyed him. Please, don't let her walk free after what she's done." The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours. On March 27, 2020, the foreperson stood and delivered the verdict. Guilty of second-degree intentional homicide. Tamara showed little emotion as the words were read. Some said she looked relieved, as if the weight of hiding was finally lifted. Others said she looked empty, as though all feeling had drained from her long ago. The judge sentenced her to 35 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25. As the gavel struck, Rosa wept openly. Marco placed a hand on her shoulder, whispering that justice at least had been done. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around Rosa. Through tears, she spoke into the microphones. "My son waited 12 years for her. He never got the life he deserved. But maybe now he can rest." The community echoed her grief. To many, David's story became a cautionary tale about love, loyalty, and the danger of giving everything to someone who has nothing left to give. And for Tamara, the cycle had come full circle. Once again, she found herself behind bars, this time not for robbery or assault, but for the ultimate betrayal, the taking of the only person who had ever truly believed in her. The trial was over, but for Rosa Moreno, the grief had only just begun. The courthouse verdict did not bring her son back, nor did it fill the empty chair at her kitchen table. Every morning, she still caught herself reaching for her phone to text him, only to remember the silence that would follow. David was buried on a cold spring day in April 2020. His funeral drew dozens. Family, friends, co-workers, even strangers who had followed the story in the news. Candles flickered inside the church, and the air was thick with sorrow. Rosa clutched the framed photo she had carried to court, whispering through tears, "You were too good for this world, Mijo. Too good." David's best friend, Marco, delivered the eulogy. His voice shook as he spoke about loyalty, about the kind of man David had been. He believed in people, even when they didn't believe in themselves. That was his gift, but it was also his curse. The congregation wept as he finished with a plea. Don't let his death be in vain. Remember him as the man who loved without limits, but also remember the lesson. Love without honesty can destroy you. In the weeks that followed, the community rallied around Rosa. Neighbors left meals at her doorstep. Local churches raised funds to cover funeral costs. A mural was painted on a wall in Pilsen, where David had grown up, a portrait of him smiling with the words, "Loyalty lives forever." But beneath the tributes was a deep unease. People whispered about Tamara, not just her crime, but the chilling swiftness with which it happened. How could someone kill the very person who had given them everything? To many, it was incomprehensible. Reporters continued to cover the story, framing it as a tragedy of devotion turned deadly. Headlines read, 12 years of love, ended in 3 days. He waited for her freedom, she took his. For Rosa, those headlines were knives. Each one reduced her son's life to a cautionary tale. A soundbite for readers who would forget his name in a week. She wanted people to know more, that David wasn't just a victim. He was a son, a brother, a man with dreams of becoming a father, of building a home filled with laughter. She began speaking at local community centers, warning young people about the dangers of toxic loyalty. Love is not supposed to cost your life, she told them. My son believed he could save someone who didn't want saving. Don't make the same mistake. Her words struck a chord. Teachers invited her to schools. Churches invited her to youth groups. Slowly, David's story became more than just a tragedy, it became a lesson. Meanwhile, in prison, Tamara adjusted once again to the cold rhythm of incarceration. Fellow inmates whispered about her case, some calling her ruthless, others calling her broken. Tamara rarely spoke. She kept her head down, serving her sentence in silence. But for those who had loved David, silence was not an option. His sister, Elena, started an online foundation in his name, promoting awareness about emotional manipulation and the risks of blind devotion. Within months, the page grew, filled with messages from people around the country who had survived similar heartbreaks. Your brother's story saved me, one woman wrote. I left a relationship that was destroying me. Thank you for sharing his life. It was a small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. For Rosa, the nights remained the hardest. She often sat by the window, staring at the mural of her son glowing under the streetlights. She prayed not just for him, but for the strength to forgive the woman who had taken him away. Forgiveness never came easily, but she clung to her faith, whispering the words her son once lived by. Loyalty matters more than wealth. And though David's life had ended in betrayal, his loyalty lived on. In the memories of those who loved him, in the lessons his story taught, and in the legacy he left behind. Time moved forward, but the memory of David Moreno lingered in the hearts of those who knew him, and even in the lives of strangers who had only read his story. His death was a wound that never fully healed, but it also became a mirror that forced people to look at what loyalty and love truly meant. For Rosa, each day without her son was a test of faith. She visited his grave often, leaving fresh flowers and whispering prayers. At times, she still expected him to walk through her front door, carrying groceries or flashing his quiet smile. But instead, she carried his spirit with her, turning her grief into purpose. Her talks at schools and community centers grew into a movement, one that saved others from walking into relationships built on secrets and imbalance. For Marco, the loss of his best friend was a reminder of how fragile trust could be. He often told people, David wasn't stupid. He wasn't naive. He just believed in people too much. To Marco, that was both David's greatest gift and his greatest weakness. As for the wider community, David's story became a symbol. Some saw it as a cautionary tale of blind devotion, of giving too much to someone who had nothing to give in return. Others saw it as a reminder of love's power, the way it could endure prison walls, time, and distance, even when it ended in tragedy. And Tamara? She remained behind prison walls, serving her 35-year sentence. Reports described her as quiet, withdrawn, unwilling to talk about what she had done. Some said she was haunted by guilt. Others believed she felt nothing at all. But whether remorseful or not, her legacy was already written. She had taken the life of the only person who ever refused to give up on her. In a way, their story was about two prisons. Tamara lived behind steel bars, bound by her own choices. David, though free, had lived in a prison of loyalty, believing so deeply in a future that never truly existed. Yet even in tragedy, his story carried meaning. His loyalty, though misplaced, reminded people of the depth of human devotion. His patience showed the world what it meant to love without conditions. And his fate taught the harsh truth, that love without honesty can turn into a cage, one that suffocates even the strongest hearts. In Milwaukee, the mural of David remained. Children played basketball nearby, pointing at his face painted against the brick wall. Beneath it, the words still read, "Loyalty lives forever." And in that simple phrase, his legacy endured. Not as a man defined only by betrayal, not as a victim of misplaced trust, but as a soul who believed, against all odds, that love was worth waiting for. For some, that legacy was heartbreaking. For others, it was inspiring. But for everyone who heard his story, it was unforgettable.